Crossing the Line.
Today I have a story that still haunts me. I don't know if my wife's affair was planned or if, as she says, it just happened. But what I know for sure is that my ex-best friend tripped and fell right between my wife's legs. Yes, I know. It sounds like a cheap excuse. But believe me, the lies and cover-ups that followed made me doubt everything. The continued intercourse between them, the laughter and the indifference, well, it just doesn't add up. This all started with something as insignificant as a phone bill. A $500 bill. Nothing out of the ordinary, right? Well, I didn't think it was until I started asking questions about these strange charges. I called the customer service line and asked for a breakdown of all the calls on my phone, my wife's phone, and my two kids' phones. The guy who answered said, "Sure, I can show you the calls on each line if you want." What a great idea. "Email it to me, please," I replied. What I got back froze me. The first thing I noticed was that my 18-year-old son was calling a sex line for 99 cents a minute. And the worst part, he was billing it to my account. There was no getting away from it. I was responsible. I couldn't help it. And no, I had no problem talking to him about it. I wish I had 10 kids. If they were all like him, life would be chaos. But oh well, that was something we would discuss later. And then I saw it. Something that didn't make sense. My wife had called, or received calls from, the same number about 20 times in the past 2 months. And the funny thing, that number looked familiar. My ex-best friend's cell phone. We used to play golf on Saturdays, and on Tuesdays after work, we'd have a couple of beers. But then, it wasn't like I was planning on spending the whole afternoon with him while I was home. No, that didn't add up. My first reaction was to think of innocent reasons. Maybe they were planning a party, or maybe some problem I hadn't heard about. At first I convinced myself that everything was fine, but doubts began to pile up. And the worst thing, the thought that crossed my mind, what if all this was happening while I wasn't looking? I decided to act. I met a guy at a bar, a researcher. He listened to me in silence as I told him what I had discovered. He calmly said, "Kelly, don't go to the dark side. It's probably nothing. Let me do what I do best. I'll hear back from you in a week, maybe 10 days. But before I go any further, I need to know about her cycle." I looked at him confused. "Cycle? What are you talking about?" "Well," he said, "when you get into the details of a situation like this, it's good to know if there are patterns. Sometimes women act differently on certain days of the month." I looked at him and replied, "Look, she's with her friend. She's been bleeding for the past 3 days." The investigator nodded with a slight smile. "Perfect, I got it. Now let me investigate. If you can, tomorrow morning take her phone, put it in your mailbox, and one of my guys will take care of returning it to her car," he said. "Do you have a spare key? I'll put a tracking device on her car and listen to her calls." "Relax. I just need you to let me do my job." Was I going crazy? Maybe. But at that moment I needed answers. I wasn't thinking of doing anything drastic, not until I was sure what was going on. And the worst part was that I knew the answers weren't going to be pretty. "If you do this, it will be illegal," I told him. He smiled at me. "Only me will do it, Joe. Only me. And everything will be under your rules." "But what if it turns out to be nothing?" I asked. "So it's okay, but if it turns out to be something more, you have to be ready." The money I paid him didn't matter to me. It didn't hurt. $2,500 was the price of the truth, and as hard as it was to swallow, I needed to know. As I gave him the money, I reminded him, "Remember what you did for me in Afghanistan, Bill. I'd be in pieces if it wasn't for you." We laughed, though the laughter sounded hollow, like there was nothing behind it. All the friends who didn't come home, their names still weighing on both of our minds, like ghosts who couldn't rest. That same night, my wife never seemed to notice anything. We had sex, twice, like nothing was happening. Maybe it was all just my paranoia. Maybe all those calls were just coincidences, and it was all in my head. but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. And when the answers came, I didn't know if I was ready for what I would discover. "Sharon, do you still love me?" She looked at me with those deep eyes, a disturbing glint in them. "Of course I love you, silly," she said with a smile that didn't quite convince me. Did she rock my world? That sounded good, but something didn't add up. "Are you my handsome prince?" She hugged me and kissed me with an almost artificial sweetness. The question that had been stuck in my throat for days came up again, but before I could ask it, she changed the subject. "Have you seen my phone?" "I thought you left it in the kitchen," she said, with an innocent look that almost made me doubt everything. Lie, I thought. I had left it in the mailbox. I knew I had left it there. I quickly got dressed, feeling that growing uneasiness. "Why are you getting dressed?" she asked, watching me with a slight surprise in her voice. "You forgot." "I forgot." "What?" I stammered, unable to help myself. I couldn't tell her the truth. She was wrapping me in her web of lies, so subtly. "We took your car to the shop today. I'm sure I told you," I said quickly. She thought for a moment. "No, I thought it was next Friday," he replied, frowning. "No, today is the oil change, filter, and inspection. I have to take you to work." "So let's go," I replied. Envier Commentarios. Panels laterals. Historial. Guardado. On the way, I stopped dead. Something was strange in the air. I looked down and there it was. The phone. "Why is your cell phone under your seat?" I stared at her, overcome with a mix of rage and confusion. "I have no idea how it got there," she replied, her voice shaking just a little. "I was sure I left it in the kitchen," she said, her tone wavering. The phone rang in my hand, and it was him, my former best friend. "Rod," I answered in a high-pitched voice, trying to imitate a girl's tone. "Hey, big guy?" "Oh, sorry. That must be a wrong number," Rod said, but I knew it wasn't. "Joe, what's up?" "Becky wants to know about Friday night. Are we doing something?" I turned to Sharon. "Are you going out with them?" I asked. "Sure, honey. Can I come?" He looked at me with those eyes, his gaze asking for my permission, as if it were the most innocent decision in the world. "Really? Is that okay?" he replied. "Sure, okay," I said, with a forced laugh, while my stomach twisted with something more than jealousy. I dressed in my best blue jeans, dressy shoes, a nice polo shirt and a jacket. I thought, "She looks good." My dear wife was wearing a little black dress I had never seen before, her hair up. She looked fantastic. "Wow," I murmured. "Let's forget about dating. I want to have you here and now. You look amazing." It was sincere, and she smiled but avoided my gaze. Something about her attitude made me feel uncomfortable. We arrived at the restaurant, where everything was in its place. I ordered a nice steak, and she ordered sautéed shrimp. I didn't pay much attention to what Rod and Becky ordered, as something was distracting me. The place was dark and noisy. The atmosphere felt tense, and there were no waitresses available. So I decided to order drinks. When I returned with the drinks, only Becky was there. Becky was very thin, tall and slender, with dark brown hair and deep, sad eyes. I put the drinks on the table, and she stared at me. "You know," she said with eerie calm, "Rod and your wife are having an affair." I froze. "What?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Yes, I know," she said unhurriedly. "I think she's submissive. Most women would go crazy at the thought, but not her." She was calm, though somewhat pensive and with a palpable sadness. "I have no proof," I said, trying to calm myself. "Me neither," Becky replied, "just a feeling." She paused for a moment and continued. "Monday morning." She was on the phone. She didn't give me any explanation. She just said she wanted to go out tonight. "Did you know?" "I found out 3 hours ago," I replied, a knot in my stomach. "Are you okay?" Becky asked, with a mixture of concern and compassion. "Well, Hey, you look very beautiful, I said, trying to change the subject. Hey, Joe, are you flirting with my wife? Rod's voice came out of nowhere, and in an instant, tensions rose. Rod, I answered without hesitation. Have you seen your wife? She looks gorgeous. Yeah, I know, he said, with a mocking smile. And hey, your wife isn't too shabby either, he added, as if he was bragging about something. Yeah, she is, I said, and I'm sure she knows it. So cheerful, Rod continued. She's so beautiful. I don't know what she sees in me. I'm a very lucky man. Thank you, honey, my wife said, but she avoided my gaze. She quickly looked away, as if she wanted to escape. Upon arriving at the club, the night seemed to be taking a different turn. The music was blasting and the neon lights gave the place a cold glow. Of something, are we going dancing? I asked, trying to distract myself. But something in the air told me that the night would not end well. We headed to the dance floor, but something kept nagging at me, like the puzzle pieces were slowly falling into place, but with an image I didn't like. Sharon, who until recently had been looking at me with a flirtatious smile, was now avoiding any kind of eye contact. Rod and Becky seemed too comfortable, as if everything was normal. But Becky's behavior made me even more uneasy. While Rod and Sharon danced, Becky came closer to me, resting her arm on mine. Did you know what's going on between them? She whispered in my ear, not looking me in the eye, as if she was sharing an uncomfortable truth. No, I replied, not quite knowing what to say. Something inside me didn't want to accept what was already clear. And what do you know? Becky smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. I know, because I saw what happened the last time they were together. You're so blind, Joe. Or do you prefer to remain blind? The sound of the music faded as his words hit my mind like a hammer. What did he mean by that? What had I seen? What was he talking about? Before I could answer, Rod appeared again, with a relaxed demeanor and a drink in his hand. Everything okay, guys? His tone of voice was friendly, but his eyes, those dark eyes, had something I didn't like. Something that didn't fit. Everything okay, I said, looking at Becky, who had returned to her place at the table. Just enjoying the night. Rod sat down next to Sharon and began chatting with her, but something in his posture, in his closeness, told me there was more than just friendship between them. Every time she laughed, he looked at her as if he was playing a game only they understood. And Sharon seemed to enjoy it. My heart began to beat faster. A chill ran down my spine as I realized that not only was I losing control of the situation, but I was also witnessing something I probably never wanted to see. Was it too late to turn back? Hey, Joe, would you mind if we danced? Sharon snapped me out of my thoughts, with a smile that no longer seemed so sincere. Sure, honey, I replied, though my voice sounded far away, as if it wasn't me speaking. But my body, as if on autopilot, stood up and walked her toward the dance floor. We danced, but it wasn't a dance like the ones before. I didn't feel the connection I had before, just a cold distance between us. She was looking at me, but with something I couldn't quite put my finger on. It wasn't sadness, or desire, or even indifference. It was something darker. In the middle of the dance, Rod came over and stood next to us, not asking for permission, as if it were natural. Wow, we both seemed to be enjoying the night, he said in a teasing tone. Sharon turned to him, smiled, and then looked back at me. Yeah, it's a great night, she replied, still holding my hand, but in a way that made me feel like I wasn't there. Rod's gaze was telling me what she didn't need to say. You know, Joe, Becky whispered again, this time so close that her breath caressed my ear. This is the end. My mind began to spin, processing his words, trying to understand the meaning behind them. I was caught between fear, anger, and despair, but there was something else. A sense of betrayal that was eating away at me inside, something I could no longer ignore. Rod, don't you have to go to the bathroom? I asked, my voice cold, calculated. If he thought this was a game, I could play too. Rod looked at me, a fake smile on his face that quickly faded. The thing is, Joe, I've already had my fun. Now, it's your wife's turn. The words hung in the air, heavy and full of meaning. I couldn't react immediately. Sharon took a step back, surprised by the harshness in my tone, but what came next left me speechless. Becky, with a grim look, dropped the bombshell that floored me. I took her hand, and we headed out onto the dance floor. It was so crowded it was almost impossible to move, but we continued dancing among the crowds, the music playing so loud it seemed to pound in our chests. We gave it our all for a couple of songs, but the feeling of discomfort wouldn't let me rest. "Hey, do you want to rest a little?" I said, worried about her. She nodded, and we started heading toward the exit of the dance floor. On the way, she pointed me to the women's bathroom. "I'm going to the bathroom. I'll wait a moment," she said. 5 minutes later, I felt impatient. I decided I had to go too. I entered the men's room, did my thing, but in one of the stalls I heard something strange. It wasn't hard to figure out what was going on inside. Resigned, I finished quickly and left. When I returned to the bathroom area, I waited longer than I expected. Something didn't fit. The bathrooms had 2 doors, and I began to wonder why I hadn't left yet. I moved to the corner, and there they were. Sharon was with a tall man, his hand on her butt. I couldn't believe it. I went straight to them. "There you are, sweetheart," I said in a cold voice, causing the guy to immediately step away. The man looked at me in confusion, but I just ignored him. "Sorry, dude. I was just warming things up for you," I said with a forced smile. Sharon didn't move, but her face was clearly uncomfortable. "Come on, sweetheart. What are you doing here?" I said in an authoritative tone as I sniffed the air. Everything had that smell, sex, semen, arousal. Something I didn't want to think was coming from her. Sharon tried to smile, but the gleam in her eyes wasn't the same. The guy next to her looked away, almost as if he wanted to disappear. "Malcolm," Sharon whispered. "Here he is in a minute, I promise." I gritted my teeth, glaring at Sharon. I walked back to the table without saying a word, but my mind was in chaos. New people had sat down. "Okay, let's see what's going on," I thought. As I approached the entrance, I saw Becky. She was crying. I was shocked. "What's wrong, honey?" I asked as I gently hugged her. Becky, her eyes filled with tears, looked at me for comfort and whispered, "I can't take it anymore." I froze, though I tried to remain calm. "Sharon's with that guy from before," I said, almost without thinking. "In the bathroom. I saw him." Becky took a breath, but her words overwhelmed me. "Rod, I saw him kissing Sharon, but that wasn't the worst of it. Then I saw him kissing a blonde girl, and Joe, he was... Anger rose through my nerves. "No, that's enough," I replied as I headed for the phone. "I'm going to call an Uber." We walked out, Becky looking exhausted. We paid the driver. Becky was in shock, and she understood perfectly. Even if she didn't say it, the atmosphere that night was tearing us all apart. At the hotel, as I waited for the detective, anxiety was eating away at me. My mind kept going back to the image of Sharon with that guy, and the worst part was that there was something else behind it. As Becky held me in silence, I tried to find some comfort, but the truth was hitting me harder and harder. I knew the end was near. I felt it. "Bill," I said into the phone, my voice sounding strained, "I need you to show me what you've got." We met at a quiet bar. Bill arrived late, apologetic. Tension was in the air. This is the worst thing I've ever seen," he said. I don't know if you really want to see all this." I asked him to do it. I wanted the truth. I needed to know for sure what was going on. When Bill showed me the video, my stomach turned. "Oh, Rod, I love the way you do that." His words repeated in my mind, with the vision of Sharon in bed. It's so much better than what Joe did, he said with a wicked laugh. My body tensed instantly, and a blinding rage took over me. I knew things would never be the same again. As the video ended, the memory of that moment in the parking lot came back full force. What you did tonight, what they did, I couldn't get that image out of my head. Back to tonight, my wife was on her knees in a bathroom stall. Whoever recorded the video was a genius with close-ups of their faces. Then in the parking lot, when I berated her and we left. 2 seconds after we left, Rod was hugging her again, saying, "Don't worry, we'll be done with them soon." I almost have all of his father's company funds saved. On top of everything, he's a criminal. By the way, my beloved wife is a willing accomplice. I've notified your dad and the police. I think your father didn't trust him. Has he had him under surveillance for some time now? I imagine the funds will be recovered quickly. He used the company computers to transfer the funds, so every keystroke was recorded. I imagine he'll be in jail for a long time. The question is, was Sharon his accomplice? She helped him make the transfers, but the true extent of her involvement, well, that's up to the prosecutor. He'll want to know that your wife and husband have booked a flight for Monday to the Cayman Islands. Please don't tell them anything about the little surprise party we're throwing for them, okay? Bill, you and your team have outdone yourselves. I'm eternally grateful, Becky said. This man got shot for me. I'm the one eternally grateful for it. Listen, you better move some money. Your loving wife could legally ruin you, so just put it in another account. Would I really recommend you meet with a lawyer on Monday? Well, that's pretty much all I've got. There are some phone conversations from your wife in her car, but I would really recommend you not listen to them, but that's up to you. I'm so sorry for both of you. I'm going to go. By the way, you're both under our surveillance, and now too. He was understandably upset, but he'll get 20 years in jail to reflect on it and recover. Sharon will spend 3 to 5 years as a guest of the state.
Joe and Rebecca continue to explore their feelings for each other. I wonder what happened to the children after their mother went to jail, especially the son who made hot calls, who should have worked at home at least to pay for her dirty expenses. Ha ha. On the other hand, Sharon and Rock are made for each other. You can see that they were very promiscuous and miserable people. They deserve to be together even though that couple didn't last long, since both went to prison. At least I found love in Rebecca. Or at least someone with whom to get what his wife gave to other men too. So we can say that it's a happy ending, since such a ruthless revenge against the unfaithful is always usually quite sweet. Let's hope that next time he can discover his partner's infidelity before it reaches these levels. What would you do in his place? How would you deal with such a betrayal? We want to know your opinion in the comments. If you like this story full of twists and turns, subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss the next videos. Be the first to discover what lies beyond crossing the line.